Today we're going to talk about a topic that often goes unaddressed because of stigma. And so what ends up happening is that it ends up actually getting way worse because people feel so uncomfortable talking about it. And that problem is pornography use. It can sabotage relationships, it can make people feel awful about themselves, it can cause people to lose their jobs. There's all sorts of things that it can do. So today we're going to talk about the problems, why they exist, and what to do about them. My name is Sean. I'm a mental health coach. I see 40 plus clients a week. I have a 98% satisfaction score from over 1,600 ratings. And I have worked through pornography issues with a lot of clients that I work with. So whether you have a pornography issue yourself or you're in a relationship with somebody that has a pornography issue, this video is for you. Let's dive in. The first thing that I want to address is that I think that a lot of people who do talk about this issue, the solution that they suggest for this issue is to just abstain. And the problem with that is that in my experience, what ends up happening is just trying to abstain results in a whole lot of relapse. And so then people feel horrible and guilty. One of the things that pornography really helps a lot of people to do is to regulate their emotions. And so if they relapse and feel horrible about themselves because they didn't abstain like they were supposed to, where do you think that they turn for comfort? The relapse actually makes it way more likely that they are going to go back to the pornography again for additional comfort. And so it becomes this vicious cycle. And what happens for a lot of people when they watch a lot of pornography is that life sort of becomes dull. It's like if you eat a whole lot of high octane sugar stuff and then you eat an apple. The apple tastes like paper because it is so dull compared to the high octane sugar that you've been ingesting. And the same thing is true with pornography, that other, real life people become less interesting because the pornography is so incredibly stimulating and sort of overproduced and shiny. And so how I see this manifest in a lot of people that I work with is that when they start looking into relationships, they'll say things like, I don't know, there's probably someone better out there. And they're just sort of generally uninterested in relationships. And there's even a term that people use called death grip syndrome, which is basically the idea that the stimulation that you get while watching pornography doesn't compare with the stimulation during sex. In a lot of relationship dynamics, porn becomes an issue because one partner feels like they are not enough for the other partner, and that's why their partner has to watch porn. In some relationships, people may even feel like watching pornography is considered cheating, and a lot of people will do things like be late to appointments, miss appointments. In severe cases, people may even do things like watch porn at work, which can have all sorts of even legal ramifications in certain circumstances. And finally, a lot of people have an issue watching porn just because of ethical concerns. They have been raised to believe that watching porn is bad and wrong ethically, that you are a bad person if you watch porn, which causes all sorts of shame and guilt. And again, like we were talking about earlier, with that vicious cycle, if you feel shame and guilt about watching pornography, where are you likely to turn? Pornography, because that is how you regulate your emotions. So now let's dive into why this is all happening, why these issues exist. So after talking with a lot of people that have problematic use with pornography, because I've talked to some people that have no problem with their pornography use, it doesn't bother them at all. But for the people that have an issue with pornography, there is a consistent pattern that I see, which is that they use pornography specifically for one of three things or more. So they will either use pornography for emotional regulation, like I've mentioned a couple of times. They will use it out of boredom, or they will use it out of routine. So when they feel really emotionally distressed, they will turn to pornography to make themselves feel better. Or they will say, well, none better to do, so might as well watch some porn, I guess. Or it's just part of a routine that they have. So every day they come home from work and it's time to watch porn. And the problem with this is that it stops becoming about arousal in all of these circumstances. You're no longer watching porn because you are aroused. You're watching porn because either you're emotionally distressed, because you are bored, or just because it's part of your routine. And that's where we really run into problems. And this is what I hear from clients that I work with, is that, when I ask them, do you watch porn out of arousal? They'll say, not really. Or they'll say, well, once I start watching, I'll get aroused. But when I first start, I'm not. So what's the solution then? Is it like everybody says, and we should just, cut porn out of our lives? Porn is just an inherently unhealthy thing. Well, if you're watching this video, it's likely that you may have already tried that and it didn't work, and it just led to the relapse that we talked about, and then you feel shame and guilt over relapsing, so then you turn toward pornography to help emotionally regulate. And so it just doesn't seem to be the most effective solution. To get to the actual solution, we have to diverge topics for a second and talk a little bit about addiction in general. When I think about addiction, I think that addiction is not a problem per se. Addiction is actually a symptom of a problem. So in a strange way, addiction is actually a way in which we treat a problem. So you think about somebody who is an alcoholic, for instance, and they drink alcohol in order to make themselves feel better. Very few people drink alcohol because they feel great. Sometimes, sure, you drink alcohol to celebrate, but usually that doesn't lead to addiction problems. Where addiction problems really come in is when there is something fundamentally wrong in someone's life, and they do something like drinking alcohol in order to numb it out or to make themselves feel better for a little while. And when we look at people who struggle with pornography, it bears a striking resemblance, because remember, the reasons that people usually use pornography when they have an issue with it is because they are bored, it's part of their routine, or because they are trying to emotionally regulate. And so that boils down to some amount of dissatisfaction, lack of fulfillment, lack of purpose in their life. There have even been studies that show that a lack of purpose in one's life has a correlation with pornography use, i.e., the less purpose you feel like you have in your life, the more likely you are to have an issue with pornography use and use pornography way more. So in my experience, the people that really find healing when it comes to their relationship with pornography are not the ones that are white-knuckling their way through abstinence. They're the ones that are treating the underlying problems that pornography use is actually trying to address. When we stop treating porn like it is the enemy and instead look at it as something that is trying to address some sort of underlying problem, it becomes much easier to work with and heal from. So there are sort of three main areas that I work with my clients on when we are working on pornography usage. The first is emotional processing. So if you use porn as a way to emotionally regulate, to make yourself feel better, then if we can give you tools to help to process your emotions, then the porn becomes less necessary. So, for instance, I have a video where I go into detail about the process of validation, which is a huge way in which I help clients to process their emotions. I'll leave a link that'll pop up here or down the description, depending on where you're watching this, so that you can see how that process works. And if you'd like personal one-on-one support helping you to emotionally process or work on your pornography usage, I'll leave a link in the description where you can schedule a free 50-minute session with me. The second area is fulfillment. So if a lack of purpose correlates with more porn usage, more problematic relationship with porn, then it stands to reason that if we help you to find more fulfillment, more purpose in your life, then the problematic porn usage goes down. And this is what I see when I work with people. And so I have a whole video where I break down what purpose looks like. Again, it'll pop up here down in the description, depending on where you're watching this. And it'll walk you through the steps that I go through with clients to help them find purpose, fulfillment, etc. And finally, the last area is when and how people use porn. So my personal stance on porn is that it is not inherently evil. Just like anything, it is the way in which it is made and the way that it is used that determines if it is good or evil. And so if you are only watching porn out of emotional regulation, boredom, lack of purpose, then it probably will be problematic in your life. And so what I do with a lot of clients that I work with is we will only use porn when they are actually aroused rather than using it out of routine or anything like this. Another crucial detail within this third thing is to focus on the sensation that you experience during porn. So a lot of people will sort of get lost or absorbed in the pornography, and it stops even being about them. They're just sort of zoning out, turning off their mind as they watch porn. Whereas if you are present and mindful within the sensation as you watch pornography, it makes a big difference in the experience. But maybe you're not just struggling with how you use porn. Maybe you're thinking about, is it okay to use porn at all? Is it even ethical? Is porn evil? So let's talk about it. I think that, like anything, it certainly can be. So for instance, there are definitely, ways in which porn is made that I would consider to be evil and predatory. And there are also ways that porn is made where it feels like art to people, where it is a very proud way, fulfilling way in which they express themselves. But is it even ethical to watch? Maybe people can make it ethically, but is it ethical for me to watch? And that question, again, comes down to it depends. So for instance, if you are watching porn from a lot of the tube sites, then the answer is probably no, because tube sites are very predatory. They steal a lot of work. There's not a whole lot of upkeep around, making sure that everyone is getting proper credit and everything. And it really tanks sex workers' careers because so much of the material is stolen, they don't get paid well, all that sort of thing. But thanks to the internet, many adult actors are actually starting their own personal brands and personal businesses based on this kind of work. And I know people are going to freak out and say, so you're saying that I should, just get addicted to a bunch of OnlyFans creators? And again, if you are getting addicted to OnlyFans creators, it speaks to a larger underlying issue. Whereas if you are using it in a healthy way and a respectful way, what's actually cool is that it creates a more human relationship with what it is that you are engaging with. And so instead of this just sort of being this objectified sexual object, instead it is a human being on the other side of things, which on the whole I would consider to be a very good thing. Now, you may think that porn is ethical, you may not have a problem using it, but you may still be running into problems with it in your relationship. So let's talk about porn in relationships. So in relationships, there are two ways that I see porn pop up as a problem in relationships. The first is that if porn use is getting in the way of the partner's needs being met, in which case, absolutely, talk about that with your partner. Talk about how your needs are not being met in the relationship and address that. Again, address the underlying issue rather than the symptom. And then the second part is that sometimes people just consider using porn to be cheating in a relationship. And if it is the second, then I would ask you some questions like, do you feel like it is cheating if your partner finds somebody else attractive? They don't take any action or anything. They just find someone else attractive in the relationship. Or do you feel like it is a problem for your partner to have friends that are the opposite gender? And I'm assuming a heteronormative relationship in this case, because that's where I see most of the issues pop up. And if your answer to these questions was yes, then the next question I would ask you is, how do you see that playing out in the long term? Like, if you keep your partner on a super tight leash, then what happens when you let go of the leash for a second? When you forget to keep such a tight hold of the leash? What do you think your partner is going to do? The other question that I would ask you is, what kind of relationship do you want to have? Do you want to have a relationship where you are constantly worried that your partner is cheating on you, that you constantly have to be monitoring them and making sure that they're not doing anything wrong? Or do you want to be in a relationship where, your partner can go visit somebody who is of the opposite gender and know beyond a shadow of a doubt that you're not going to have any problem, that you can trust your partner? Do you want to have a relationship that is built on a foundation of trust? And finally, the last question I would ask you is, what happens when you and your partner's libidos don't line up? Are you supposed to just tough it out and meet your partner's needs anyway? Or are they supposed to completely suppress any sexual feelings that they have and not masturbate at all? A pattern that I often see in relationships is that partners expect their significant other to meet all of their emotional needs, sexual, emotional, even existential. And it breeds codependency. And over time, what ends up happening is that it actually smothers the relationship because the other person feels so incredibly suffocated that they don't want to be in the relationship anymore. And so they run away. And by the way, this is not specific to either gender. I have seen in heteronormative relationships, I've seen men that smother women and women run, and I've seen women that smother men and men run. So either way, it can lead to a whole lot of codependency. So ultimately, when I work with people who feel like porn is cheating in a relationship, it always boils down to one of two issues. Either they feel insecure in the relationship, or it boils down to stigma, which makes sense because porn is very stigmatized. And so it makes sense that you would also hold that stigma. Now, feeling insecure in a relationship is perfectly valid. We all feel insecure sometimes. And what I would encourage, again, just like we've talked about throughout this entire video, is to address the root rather than the symptom. Address the cause rather than the symptom. So if you feel insecure in your relationship, talk to your partner about that and work through that with them so that you can build a foundation of trust with your partner. And if you like videos where I'm talking about stigmatized topics like this, then this video actually goes into a topic that I think is really important and heavily stigmatized, which is suicidality. It'll either pop up here or down in the description. Hope it's helpful, and I'll see you next time. Bye!